strategy, but I think we really do believe we need to be much more aggressive in proactively sourcing where the best companies are coming from and identifying them earlier on. And I think that that includes certainly companies where women are playing lead roles. But I think just in general, that proactivity is important. Bill, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that one of the points I tried to make in terms of involving all of this, regardless of their background, is that that's a very powerful piece of the equation in terms of sourcing. And so one of the reasons we are trying to actively educate and engage all of our members is so that they can be aware of opportunities that they commonly encounter. And oftentimes these come in areas or conferences or circumstances that are altogether unforeseen. So the more boots that we have on the ground, the more efficacious we are. Having said that, I think that some of us, I have the great good fortune to live in an area, Seattle, and participate in the Bay Area where it's fairly target rich in terms of development of these areas. And so I try to kind of keep some dialogue going, and I think all of us can do that in the areas that we live in, and I think that will ultimately prove beneficial as far as sourcing is concerned. So the point is long-winded, but I think that all of us here can serve the greater purpose of that just by realizing what we're looking for and encouraging those people that you know to be confident to and encourage them to reach out to us as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would just mention, we kind of glanced at it, I think Gina mentioned it, is that an important part of this sector is syndication. So because of the capital requirements and the arc of investment that's needed, but that's also a sourcing strategy as well. And we've been working now with a number of other investor groups. We need them in terms of getting together to make these larger capital investments. But they also quite often are, we're kind of unusual in that we invest in lots of different things, as everybody knows. And many of these groups focus, just on a particular sector or subsector. So they quite often can bring us into deals and help us source some of the best companies too. So syndication and having great relationships with certain syndicators or certain other investment groups is part of the strategy as well. Other questions? Yes.
How cumbersome is the
Mike.
How cumbersome is the state acquisition and the process of getting grants through the states? Do they act quickly enough? I mean, the states don't have reputations for being very quick in their responses, and I wondered if that process should be concurrent with the angel investment. I mean, do you want the companies to begin right away, or should they wait for milestones to be more successful in that?
The state, the grants obviously are very hard to get and very competitive. If you're looking at NIH, if you're looking at some of the small business innovation, that is a very competitive process. I think that's actually a good thing for us, because if you do have one of those, that shows that there's a technology there, there's something there. So that kind of is an interesting flag, if you would, to look at the criteria. The particular program that I'm familiar with in New Jersey is, I felt like that the rules are there, it's clear, the communication sometimes is lacking with the state. And I think that's where the entrepreneur really has to be a go-getter and get out there and understand how the process works. And once they master the process, it really doesn't take a long time to say, okay, I have these tax loss carry forwards and I know what to do with them and I can sell them. And that process, there is a criteria, however, you have to be in business 2 years. Obviously, you had to have raised some money because it's tax loss carry forward, so you have spent some money. So it really is more of a follow-on than your initial investment. So definitely, it's something that's part of the strategy, and I think you need both. The angels and the help from the various state governments in order to make it work.
I'm sure it's pretty onerous in terms of getting them, but in addition to NIH, I think we've seen a number of companies that had Defense Department grants. And I don't know if those are easier than NIH or not, but the Defense Department is making huge investments in certain areas of life science. So that's another avenue, but it all takes work, I agree. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, well, I come from more of an industry, family owns, and I think that the grant process can take longer. Sometimes to get the grant, you have to position your research in a certain way instead of just, putting in that sort of industrial process of, manufacturing and clinical. You might have to do some earlier type of research and work. So, ideally, I think a company can move faster with, private capital, although the non-dilutive vetting process is very important. And if you have a company that's come in and they have the grants already, then you can be more sure that their science is strong.
Do you have time for probably one or two more questions? Yeah, sorry.
Just a clarifying question. Is the diagnostic market fall under the medical device market?
Typically, they're class 2 devices because they're external to the body, and your process usually you have to do 3 sites and compare it to an existing gold standard test on the market.
Yeah, actually, interesting, the nomenclature is changing because you have these intersecting sectors. We're seeing the healthcare kind of crossover into the diagnostics. I don't know if anyone read 23andMe is now partnered with Pfizer. So, you're seeing a lot of crossover. So now medical devices, they're actually calling it medical technology. So I think that encompasses a broader swath, which makes our job harder because we have to look at the subsector and go to the niche market.
Mindy?
First, thank you. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate it. So just going back to team for a second, and pardon my naivete, but when you look at startups, scientists make good business people, or are you looking for good teams of people around the scientists in whatever field this is? I just wanted to comment.
Who wants to go first, Jennifer?
Well, you really want to have, they need to either hire a good regulatory consultant or have someone on there that has run, those field tests and operations. So you look for that type of development. I think, sometimes, the scientist is good early on, and then, you really need to turn this into a product and get it out the door. You need, I like to see experience of the commercial process, someone who's introduced a device to the market and done those marketing studies and knows how to drive adoption and penetration, because ultimately, that's the end game. And so the scientists, that's not what their experience base is. They've never sold a syringe, so, that kind of sales commercial experience, I think, can really frame things, because there's that view, bringing that view in early on, I think is very important.
Okay, so from experience, the funny story of the crazy scientist. Everyone needs a crazy scientist as a life science company. I think that's part of the creativity, you need that. But the crazy scientist without the business person is a disaster. So one of the things that I look at is to make sure that the team is balanced. You can have, you need the scientist, but then you need the business person. And, one of the things I even teach is that the diverse teams are the best teams. So I'm looking for that diversity. I don't want to see everybody that has the same experience, but I do look for industry experience. I think it's important. The pharma industry does an amazing job at training, and those people know how to execute. And that's what you're going to need, but you still need that, startup creativity, crazy mentality to bring you to places that you wouldn't ordinarily go.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Mindy, what we've seen in practice is that just what both Gina and Jennifer have said, and really kind of one of the real red flags is when you've got a science group, or 1 or 2 people, founders, who are not aware of what they don't know and aren't willing to bring in somebody at the right time from the business perspective. That's sort of, to me, a real caution that this is probably not going to be successful. Okay, yes, one more and then we have to.
So I want to concur, this was excellent. Well, how difficult is it to get Medicare reimbursement once there's FDA approval? What's the timeline?
Thanks for bringing that up. I actually had meant to ask that question earlier, that the reimbursement piece of this is really key. So let's just spend a minute, each of you, on that, and then we'll close it. Okay.
It's, it's more straightforward than in Europe where you're dealing with individual areas. The key is the amount of reimbursement, that you're trying to get, and the code, you have to get a CPT code, and so it's very important early on when you're evaluating this, even at the angel stage, that they have a clear idea of what their code will be, and the code really drives the reimbursement that they're going to get, and which in turn drives the revenues and the evaluation of the whole thing. So understanding, where they fit in terms of how it's going to be coded and how it's going to be billed and charged is really important. And more, it used to be that, well, we'll figure that out later. And you want to have that idea very early on of how they're going to get that code. Once they get the code, it's very straightforward.
I mean, just looking at the disruption that's happening in the healthcare industry in terms of Obamacare, healthcare technology, what's going on with even prescription drugs. I mean, all of these costs, especially in the hospital market, everybody's conscious of cost. So I think it's even more than reimbursement. I think reimbursement for Medicare is one component of it, but I think one of the things that you need to look at is the cost compared to what's out there. So you might have this amazing, fantastic new product, but if it costs 10 times of what's out there, it's going to be really hard to get that market adoption later on.
For example, for diagnostic tests, their reimbursement rates are really, there's the level of difficulty, the type of technology, and if you come in and you have a certain type of technology and a certain level of difficulty, you will get a certain price for that, and that is going to be the box that you're put in. And to Gina's point, if you're priced, 100 times outside of the box, you won't get it.
Yeah, we found doctors are very, very quick to figure that out too, if they're the ones responsible, if it's a pass-through cost for them, for sure. So I know I learned a lot today, and I work in the sector quite a bit, so thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you, Fran, Gina, Jennifer, and Bill. This was really superb discussion. Thank you for being here. It was so well done. Great, thank you. We'll come back in at 11 o'clock. Thank you.